Hello and welcome to another video. So today we are taking a look at a Natura dragon list. These have been refined down a fair bit over the last week since you've seen my previous video. And while not a lot has changed, some stuff has become more important. I've updated it to add an extra Valdain in since I managed to get another one through temporary just to make sure. The same with Viridian Magna. We're running the Neptune, which is actually a crazy good card, and Dragon Buster, which is different to what I believe I had in the other variations. So you could make some small changes here. Maybe swap, if you're missing one of these sort of cards, you can kind of swap in Genesis as just an extra pull. But overall, pretty consistent deck and does a pretty decent job. So we'll get right into it and take a look. So the two most current decks that are probably the strongest and most seen seems to be Haven and Forest. Of course, Roach Forest in particular, and the new Haven variation running on the Natura engine is pretty powerful, and I don't blame that, but it's not too overpowered. I find they're reasonably balanced in a sense. They keep each other in check fairly well and do a pretty alright job overall of maintaining the meta, and Dragon's a pretty nice slot in as well with Shadow as about the same kind of level in just below them. So it's a very close race. I feel like if either Forest or Haven or both get nerfed, you'll see a rise in stuff like Dragon and Shadow more often, and maybe even Sword, as that has turned out to be a okay deck as well. Rune has pretty much dropped off as far as it goes, so that's a little disheartening. But I have been trying a Mecha Rune again, going back into that with only really one new addition, and that actually seems to be doing okay. So Rune might still be in an okay spot. You just can't expect to play something like Natura Rune, which isn't quite as good. So of course with this deck, we are aiming for as much ramp as we could get. We started off ramping fairly well, so that was a pretty great bonus there. Taking advantage of the Whirlwind, and of course with the Lightning Velociraptor, we can start gaining some more plant to just kind of ramp up, which is great. Probably what we really need, to be honest. So I tried to generate as many trees as I could so I could draw some more cards. Looking for that Valdain, I kind of want that a little earlier, so we could at least play it out and get the advantage of start dealing damage, especially against Forest. While this doesn't appear to be a Roach Forest, these Fairy Forest decks are quite powerful as well, and I do plan on covering one of those for you guys as well. They are usually an Okami Forest build, and they are fairly strong, so you do have to be fairly quick with those decks. Which doesn't work out great for me in this situation, because of course we're not playing the super fastest deck in the world, but it can still get the job done fairly well. So using more trees, great for draw power, great to generate that value in the future. Being able to then use, of course, the Alchemic here, which pretty much guaranteed Valdain at that point. Not quite guaranteed it, but definitely had a high chance of pulling one, since it does pull Natura cards. The Natura cards. And we got a nice 3-1 left over, so we're not doing too bad in this matchup so far. We've managed to keep the board pretty empty, which is great. And we've had enough tree destruction that Valdain should come in handy next turn. We do want to remove that 4-5, which Valdain will do quite nicely. And we should have enough points to play a 2-drop card. So we can either go for the Traveler or really just the Traveler. I don't really see anything else to play that would be any good. And that will both heal us and get us a little bit extra damage on the Valdain ping, so can't really go too wrong there. Plus, we're now doing 6 damage a turn currently, which we could potentially increase to more. And we only need to survive one more turn after this to make the Genesis worthwhile. This Okami turn, though, is rough and not what I want to see. We really want to wipe this out as much as possible, or we're going to definitely be in trouble. Luckily, Verdant Magna off the top is pretty much a perfect clear. We had some options. I didn't like my luck of pulling another Whirlwind to get the extra play point to make the Masamune useful, but that was going to be a potential play. And that's this way we actually get a ward as well, which should protect us quite nicely in case of another Okami play. Ladika as well, that's fine. We still got the protection up, which is great. And all we really need next turn is to play Genesis to win the game. Even though we are one off the Genesis itself, of course the ping from our end of turn Valdain effect will do it. And that will close out the Forest game fairly well. Of course, versus Roach we could have been in more trouble, But at the same time, we could have had a better board, which thus would have got us more damage in the early game potentially. So it's a really double-edged sword with this deck sometimes against Forest. Next up, Dragon versus Shadow. Shadow is a little more interesting, I think, than Forest and Haven at the moment as far as decks go. I actually quite enjoyed playing Shadow, even if it wasn't the best deck around. But I do expect things to continue to change and evolve over at least this week. I mean, by the time this video kind of gets out to you guys, it should be pretty much shifted to a point where we got to stabilize meta. And if we don't hear an announcement for any changes this month, we most likely won't see any at all until mini expansion, which wouldn't surprise me at all, honestly. Since the meta doesn't seem to be super over encumbered, other than Roach. Roach seems to be something that pops up for 3 or 4 matches in a row, but then kind of dies off for a little bit and comes back. At least while I've been playing, and I've played, you know, a fairly good number of matches now so far. But Roach and Haven are definitely 2 of the most popular decks, for sure. So we wanted to start off again as early as we could, getting as much as we could, and we do a fairly good job of generating the trees while also keeping a nice balance of play point generation to get ready for our Valdain play. This was actually one of the better games I had as far as generating value went. As you can see, we generated quite a few and still managed to keep our play points reasonably high.
I stand at the edge of eternity.
Sovereign on their side though isn't a bad play at all. Fortunately for us, Valdain with an Evo will be able to take this out, even if it costs us the follower. But we will be able to get that and the desert potentially out as extra board presence, so we will start dealing some damage starting now, really putting them on a clock. And that's exactly where you want your opponent to be, especially when they're only 2 turns off from being Genesis Dragoned. So the Manifest Malice and the Warring Flame, neither of which are that big a threat to me at this point. They're not fun cards, but they're not things that I'm too worried about. I've definitely seen worse cards come up. I am looking for something though, really anything that can buy us at least this next turn and get us some damage in hopefully. And the Whirlwind's okay, I mean that's going to give us that little bit extra. Especially with the Evolve on the Desert Pathfinder. So I could have saved the Evolve and used it on Genesis for an extra couple of damage, but I did feel like the tree getting on board was going to be a little better, just in case I run into some trouble this turn with stuff like Necro Family here. I was kind of expecting Necro Family to come down soon, so I wanted to have at least a potential turn where I could just play Raging Dragon and pass. And I'm glad I did, because this gives us a fairly nice chance to just go for Genesis now. Since we have got 5 damage from the trees, Genesis for 7, and a pretty perfect lethal. So I've definitely found that the Natura Dragon and the Natura Shadow decks are some of my favourite Natura variations. Blood is okay, mainly because it's a control deck, and that's something different that we haven't seen for a little while for Blood. But it's not super powerful, it's actually one of the weakest Natura decks overall. Sword, unfortunately, doesn't use the archetype a lot in any kind of functional way. Haven, really good, but I just don't find it enjoyable. And Shadow, as I mentioned, is another one that's with Dragon as at least a fun variation. It has some interesting interactions that you can take advantage of, so I'm looking forward to some more experimentation with Shadow in that regard. But overall, hopefully you guys did enjoy this video. This deck is fairly decent if you're just looking for a Dragon deck to play. I highly recommend it in that case. Hit like button, subscribe for more content. You'll find deck lists in the description below. Until next time, guys. See ya.